Alright everyone, so in this part of the video, I would like to walk you guys through on three of the most fundamental styling properties of Tailwind CSS, which are margin, padding, and borders. These three properties are widely used in most of the components development. So let's get started by learning the first one. In this case, I would like to walk you guys through margin. So margin is basically the space that you would like to give outside of a box, outside of a container, and that's the basic idea of margin. So in this case, you can actually give your margin like this here. As you can see, you can give margin equals to 0 just by saying margin dash 0. And in this case, you also happen to find there's margin x-axis and margin y-axis. Here you might be thinking, what is it? Basically, margin x-axis and margin y-axis basically is to give margin on a selected part of your container. So as you can see here, x-axis is meant for left and right side of your container, and while margin y-axis is meant for top and bottom part of your container. So that's the basic idea of the margin. And you also happen to find there's margin t, which equals to margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, and so on. So I'd like to make you guys do one of the most important way, which is the most important part here. As you can see, you can actually give margin equals to left. Margin left equals to 2. As you can see, you have to find some spacing has been given on your left hand side, and here you can find there's some spacing on the top here bottom, and here is right hand side, and that's the basic idea. And here, as you can see here, when you give margin x-axis equals to 8, you'll be able to find there'll be some spacing on your left hand side and right hand side like this, and this is called horizontal margin, and that's why it's margin x-axis. And also you also find vertical margin, where you're able to give only on top of your container and the bottom of the container, and that's the basic idea of all the margin. You want to give your margin evenly and throughout the entire container. You don't have to say x-axis, just need to say m equals to 8, something like that, and that's the way how you are able to make use of margin. And next, let's have a look at padding. So padding, on the other hand, is basically is to give spacing within your container, and that's the difference between padding and margin. The main difference is margin is to give spacing outside of your container, while padding is to give spacing within your container. That's the basic idea. And as you can see here, almost they are having the same style of the style. As you can see here, padding equals to 0 is basically you can just keep by saying padding dash 0. And of course, padding x-axis is meant for horizontal sides, and padding y-axis basically is to give spacing on your vertical sides. And of course, you will also happen to find you will have padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left, and so on. And padding margin will be sharing almost the same thing. For example, padding equals to top, you'll be able to find there'll be some space within your container at the top here, then there's a side here, the bottom here, and then there's a side here, and so on. As you can see, you also happen to find horizontal padding when you give padding x-axis, and that's the reason why you only able to find some spacing has been applied only on your right hand side and left hand side. For vertical padding here, as you can see, there will be the spacing, the padding will be given within your container at the top here and the bottom here. And if you would like to have it evenly spread, you just need to say padding equals to 8. You don't need to put x-axis or y-axis. And next, let's look on how to implement borders. So borders are basically the outline of a container, and that's the basic idea. And basically, this is the way how we are able to set borders. As you can see, border equals to 0 means the width of your border should be 0, and of course border 2 is basically when you're having a width of 2, and so on. And let's learn more about it. As you can see here, when you put border, just by saying border and then followed by border equals to the color, as you can see, color can be sky 500 or red 300, something like this. You're able to find the borders actually evenly spread like this. And you can also have dash 2 to increase the thickness of your outline just by putting dash 2, and so on. Next thing would be to give individual borders. As you can see, only on separate sides. In this case, you can see border T, which meant for only top. This is right, this is bottom, and this is left. And this is the way how you're able to give borders only on one particular side. And let's say if you like to give two sides, and you can give like x-axis. Basically, border x-axis meant for your side, right hand side and left hand side, and y-axis is meant for top and bottom, same like margin and padding, and so on. And right now, as you can see here, this is the basic idea of how you are able to make use of padding, margin, and borders. As you can see here, this particular border is your container here. Let's say if you like to give padding, you'll be able to find, let's say if you like to give padding top and padding bottom, all you have to just say padding x-axis would be fine to call these two particular padding. And if you like to have padding left hand side and right hand side, you just need to say padding equals to x-axis, and that's the way how you're able to do that. And also applies for margin top here. Basically margin is basically to give spacing outside of your container, while padding is to give spacing within your container. And this just some basic idea, and let's just get some practice on Tailwind CSS by actually doing some coding. As you can see here, I have actually implemented a simple box here. This kind of box is actually this particular red color box right here. And all I did here, I just placed it like a padding of 5 right here. So what does this padding of 5 actually does is to give some spacing within here. As you can see, this particular space, white color space right here, is basically this particular padding because of 5. Let's say if I were to remove this particular padding and just like remove it like this, and you're able to find there's no spacing within this particular container. And that's the reason why you're able to find your red color box is just have no space within it. And right now, let's say if I like to add spacing for this particular box, and let's say if I'm inside this particular box right here, and in order to have some spacing around this particular box, all I have to say I need to add margin in this case. In this case, I have to add margin equals to 5. And once you click save, you're able to find this particular space has been created as well. But this time it's actually meant coming from margin of this particular red color box right here. And yeah, and that's the basic idea of how you're able to make use of padding and margin for your Tailwind projects. And that's the end of this particular part of the video. Thanks for watching. Let's catch up on the next one.